I think two things. First of all, you can say if you think this model of multiple stakeholders and subcultures is complex for organizations, then you can say it's obviously much more complex for countries, particularly Switzerland. That's one observation. Another observation is that branding, strong branding also starts with behavior. And now you mentioned tax, you mentioned bank secrecy. I mean, you mentioned a lot of issues, let's just say, where the meaning has changed. And I think that's an important issue about branding, and the listening component is to see that once was heaven for rich people, and you can say we were all very proud if we knew somebody who knew somebody who had an account in Switzerland. Today it's something we're ashamed of. And I just think that's, I mean, I'm sitting on a bank board, and I know how poor bankers, we heard a story from the UK, there was some people had said to the bankers, don't wear your pinstripe suits anymore on the tube because people are going to harass you, because there's so much anti-sentiment towards bankers these days that you have to protect yourself. Same thing goes for banking employees. You must have somebody here who works in a bank. That the meaning of being a banker has changed a lot. It's very stressful of the culture, and I think every bank on the planet is in a need for revitalization. And you can say part of that industrial image problem spills over to Switzerland. And I guess that's what you were alluding to. At least that's what I would deal with. And that's a political issue which goes way beyond banking to resolve. But I mean, it's no secret how much Obama has been after some of the Swiss banks and so on and so forth. So I think that's a serious issue. And in that sense, you can say you cannot communicate yourself out of a practice which has changed the interpretation. Denmark faced, you may know, the Mohammed crisis a couple of years ago, where we were being accused, rightfully so, by printing some cartoons in the newspaper which were offensive to the Muslim world. A lot of Danish companies were caught up in riots and flag burning and death threats and so on in the Middle East region. And they had a lot of tensions about whether they wanted to be Danish. Of course, you're a Danish company. You cannot sort of pretend that you are not. But that they had a long, long way to go in trying to both convince that they were not all like that, and that's then you have to convince the full world that Switzerland is more than greedy bankers. It's a lot more than greedy bankers. But that's one way you can say to convince that you're more than that, but also that you confront the issue and say there are some problems, and Denmark is in some ways there's nationalist sentiment and so on and so forth that you have to confront at the national level. That debate is not over yet, and it was a major wake-up call from this little fairy tale country to being accused of being much more racist, if you will. So in that sense, I'm just giving some parallels. I don't want to be an expert in Switzerland by any strike of the imagination, but just some parallels and some thinking, and I think it's a very important issue.
Marketers talk about growing the category. Is that language that's familiar to you guys? Sometimes when you're working in an area that has a lot of room for growth, like wine in the United States about 25 years ago, Robert Mondavi was quite famous for teaching vintners in California how to make wine to European standards, because he knew that if he could create fine wines and elevate the palates of the American people, that there was a market there that was going to, and has proved to be, quite large. I think country branding and Switzerland's problem might be treated as a growing the category problem, where together the corporations of Switzerland might put their heads together about how they can use their brand power and their influence in the world to not manipulate the images of others, but to remind people what all the things that Switzerland brings to the world are, to recreate that sense of self-esteem and self-worth, and to communicate to the rest of the world that there's a lot more to this country than perhaps the stereotypes are currently allowing people to understand. So that's another way to think about it.
One last comment is Spain. You all know post-Franco Spain. There's an interesting group of the 15 largest Spanish companies called the Foro de Reputación Corporativo, which came together, Telefonica, Inditex, Repsol, BBVA Bank. I mean, a lot of very, very powerful companies came together with the idea of changing the world's perception of Spain. Either it was Franco or it was flamingo and oranges, so to speak. So they wanted to build the bridge of modern Spain, high-tech, global, interesting, experiential, passionate, what have you. But they went together not just to rebrand the country, but also to show through examples that a lot of these corporations were bringing the new Spain. And I think it's interesting because opposed to Tony Blair's new cool Britannia, that was very much only a political, you can say, country branding, if you will. But Foro in Spain, which is still alive and well, now of course the mission has been accomplished, we're in a new situation. But it's an interesting example of corporations and a network of corporations that through events like this and a lot of other activities were trying to get the attention of the world that there was more to Spain than the old stereotypes from Franco's time and from mass tourism. And that was powerful corporations doing it in a network. So in a sense, they were doing enterprise branding, not at the country level, but they were using each other's strength and dialogue to try and do something to raise to expand the category of what Spain means to people outside also.
I would have liked to have your comments about corporate responsibility or corporate social responsibility. I had the feeling the corporate branding is really etching the corporate responsibility, and I wanted to know how you feel about it. Will corporate responsibility replace corporate branding? And I mean, today or tomorrow, companies have to become responsible actors, and you know that a lot of companies are now editing corporate social reports. So I just would have liked to have your opinion about that. I mean, corporate social responsibility covers much more than just what you have explained.
Yes,